Hello, this is me, Firecharged 174. This is a Java as a first language video, and what this series is about, it's gonna be a little mini series. It's gonna try and be like a school class. I'm gonna try and make so maybe 40 minutes or so videos. I don't know how long this recording is gonna be. We'll see. We're gonna help you understand Java and kind of make programming in general. And so that way you can go on and try and use other languages. So let's start with some IEDs. IED is an integrated development environment. It's where you code. It's where you see all the hackermans typing and stuff. They're using an IED. So examples of this are VSC, short for Visual Studio Code, IntelliJ, NetBeans, Eclipse. The latter three are specifically for Java development. It doesn't even have to specifically be a fancy IED. You can use Notepad. You can just right-click, new text document, Notepad, and you could do in here. And I will be using Visual Studio Code. So let's look at some code for a second. Vocab. We got class. A class is what contains all the code. It's the same name as the file, and it is case sensitive. A variable represents any value, can be a numerical value, or like a word or a sentence. So different types of variables. We have ints, short for integer, can be positive or negative number, and it's the range of the value. Then we have strings, can be a word, a sentence, or a letter. Doubles are decimal value numbers, so you have like 1.5, 1.2, 1.679 to 420. Those are doubles, and that's your range of it. And a boolean represents a true or false value derived from Boolean algebra. So now that we have some basic vocabulary, let's go on over to IED and try to get some stuff worked out. So now that we're on the desktop, we're going to create a new folder for it to contain our code. So we're just going to create new folder. I'm just going to call this a Java tutorial. Now I'm using the Visual Studio Code IED, so I'm going to be opening up a new window. I'm going to go to File, Open Folder. Navigate to the desktop, Java tutorial, select folder. Let's start by creating a new file. I'm going to call this main.java. Any Java file you're coding has to be ended in Java. So I'm calling my file main. Note that it is with a capital letter. Enter to generate the file. So whenever you're starting, you have to create the class. And so I'm going to go public class. You can ignore the autocompletes in Visual Studio Code for now, and we're just going over the basics. Main. And then bracket, and you're going to space, and you're going to code here. Now, bracket style is something that's completely up to you. You can have a bracket there, you can have a bracket there, you can have a bracket there, you can have a bracket over here. I like my brackets here for my class files. So now we're going to create what is called the main method. This will be the first thing that any Java will look at. It'll execute that code there first. And so any Java coder has this ingrained, this line ingrained into their head. Public static void main string args. So just get that line typed out. Public static void main. This is the name of the method. This is a method, the main method. And we're passing to that method our arguments, our parameters, string, an array of strings called args. Now this is where you're going to do your most code. So let's go back over to the notes. So let's practice with displaying information to the console. This line here, system.out.print, quotation marks, hello world, and end with a semicolon. This will print hello world to the console, as will this line. So now that we are back in our console, we're going to display hello world to the console. So we're going to type in system out.print. So you can see the difference between print and print line, print ln. And put this in quotation marks. I'm going to say hello world. Okay, so when you are ready to compile a Java program, compile and run it, you first need to access your command prompt. So go down here, type in command, and you're going to open that up. I already got one prepared right here. So what you're going to do is go, and you're going to use the cd command, and you're going to go to folder name, and you keep doing that until you are in the necessary folder. I will run the command to compile javac main.java, and you always have to compile with the full title name, including the .java, and to run it, java main. As you can see, that it prints out hello world. Now let's just take one step back and look at those notes. So this is just for you, not for me, it's for you. Note slide on compiling. Okay, so I'm just going to pretend whatever that last clip was is usable. Okay. So now that we've got compiling and running out of the way, let's continue looking at those print statements. Okay, so we have our basic print statement, and let's just print. Let's see what happens when we do that twice. So copy that and paste it again. Let's see what happens. So we save it, then we go to here, then we compile it, and no errors, and we run it, and we get hello world with no space. That's because print takes whatever's there and just prints it on the same line. So if we do print line, you save it, compile it, and run it. And you'll see you'll also have the same result. That's because no matter what follows the print statement, it will always be there. There are ways to get around this, but the easiest way is when you see now, we'll just print line both of those, and we'll compile it and run it, and we see we get two separate print world signs. Okay, so now we move on to the variables. So there is declaring and initializing of variables. So declaring a variable is just going int and then the variable name followed by the semicolon. And initializing it, you have to follow initializing following the declare. So declares first, then you initialize it. And you var name equals and 69 for the value. Or you can do it in the same line, do int, pardon the capitalization, var name equals some value. So let's just get rid of code we have here, and let's go int x equals 4. So this is declaring and initializing. Let's do int y. Let's go down the line and do y equals 9. Now let's say we wanted to see what these values look like. So we can do system.out.println, and we'll just print x, because a nice autocomplete for us. So let's see what that looks like. So we have x equals 4. What is this going to look like? Compile, run, and you're going to say to print 4 in our command line. Now, what would happen if we were to wrap that in quotation marks? Because that printed out hello world. Why wouldn't it print out 4 this time? So let's see what happens. Let's go compile and run and see if we can print out x. So putting anything in quotation marks will print out whatever is there. So if I just do that and I compile and run it, you'll see it'll print out. So whatever's in quotation marks is what's printed. But what if you wanted to print out a variable, the content of a variable, and a string? So you could say, in quotation marks, x is, and for neatness, we'll follow the space. Then you can go here, following it, hit it with a little plus sign, and then the variable name, which is just x in this instance. So this should say x is 4. So let's compile and run it. X is 4. So we get the content of the value. So there are more than just integers. Basically the same thing that we're doing here. We'll work with doubles. But let's say we wanted to work with strings. String str, right? So we're declaring it. This is declaring, remember? And we go str equals, and this can be as simple as a little f. It can be an hi there. It can be hi there. And it can just be complete nonsense, right? And we always follow that semicolon. So we do system.out.println, right? And let's just print out the string. Because remember, if we wrap this in parentheses, it's just going to print str. So if we just test that, we're going to compile, and we're going to hit it with a run. And we see we got our why am I gesturing to the screen? You can't see me gesturing. Okay, so now we know how to look at variables. We know how to print these variables. We know how to print these variables in words. What if we want information from you? Let's say I want to say, without the hard coding, as they would say, that x is 4. Let's say I wanted to change that. Like I say, put a number for x, and you say 10, right? You could do this. It's called getting information from the console, which is what you're using, the console. So to obtain input, you must first import right here, scanner. Import java.util.scanner. You do this before you have your class. This is above the class. It can be anywhere above the class, right? And to create a scanner, you do so in the main method. Scanner, so they're declaring it here. So this is the declaration of the scanner. And then we're going to initialize it, equals new scanner. Now this is a type of object, so we're calling this new scanner, and we're going to pass to it, in parentheses, system.in. Now to be able to use the scanner, you can't just like say this and it'll magically say what's a number. You have to use scanner methods. So we have our scanner name dot next int. This will take the next integer on the line. Next double. We have next, which will take whatever's before space, and then the next line will take the entire line. So these are commonly used for strings. These are used for doubles, ints. So let's take a look at that. So let's delete everything we had, and let's do this. So we're going to do scanner input, because that's common for scanner, equals new scanner system.in. Follow that with one of those. Now, we can't use it because we haven't imported it. So let's go to the top of our file. A few lines down, we go import java.util.scanner bracket. See, now it's got a funky underline. That means we got it. We're not using it. So let's say we got an int x, right? And we want to get that information from these, or say, what does x equal? So we go system.out.println. I'm going to say, what should, if I could type, be the value of x, right? So asking is what should be the value of x. So then we're going to say, x equals input dot next, and we're next int, and we're just going to end that with semicolon. We have no idea if this works, so we're going to hit it with a system.out.println, and we're going to say x is, and we're in space, and remember to add a variable to it. We're just going to say
plus x. Alright, so we're creating our scanner here. We're declaring x here. We're saying what should be the value of x. X is next line. And then we're going to print out what we put in for x, right? Let's go to here. Let's compile and run it. So we're given what should be the value of x, and we had a blinking underscore line. So let's say we want x to be 7. So we have 7, and it's not going to do anything until you hit enter, and then it's going to say x is 7. Now, what happens if we say x is right? That's not x. You're going to get an error. Input mismatch exception, which means you entered a string and it was looking for an x. That's a no-no. You can't do that. Okay, so now that we got our value of x and we printed it out, let's see what other funky things we can do with our x variable, right? So I'm just going to copy this line, and we're going to copy that line. Now let's see what else we can do. Now, what are the things you can do with x? You can do math, right? Because this is a number and you want to change it. Maybe you want to multiply it. Maybe you want to divide it. Maybe you want to add it to itself, right? So let's look at how you would do that. So these are the basic mathematical operations you can do. So we have our plus sign, which is plus, which is addition. We have our little dash, which is subtraction. We have forward slash, which is division. We have an asterisk, which is for multiplication. And then we have a percent sign, which is mod division, which I will get to in a second. So back in here, so let's continue with the code we have now. So let's say x, right, plus 2. You can't do that. That's not how that works. You're just saying x plus 2. Where's that being saved? Where is x plus 2 equal to? So we're going to say x is the same as x plus 2, right? So we're adding 2 to the x, and now let's just see what x is again. So let's compile and run it. So what should be the value of x? Let's call x2. So we see x is 2, and then we see x is 4 because we added 2 to the x. There is a fast way to do this. And it's not really faster, but it looks cooler. So you do plus equals. This is the exact same thing, right? So let's just compile and run it again. So you can see this. This does the exact same thing, right? Just to say 2 is 2. Is x2 equals 4. So it's just taking 2 and adding itself to 2. Now this works with all other mathematical operations. So we can say times, right? It's times equals 2. So it's going to take itself and it's going to multiply by 2 and make it the new value, right? So let's compile. Ignore the loud dogs. So what should we, so what's x should be? X can be 3, right? And we say x is 3, and we're multiplying by 2, and we get 6 is the new result, right? So back to that mod division. X equals x mod 3, right? So what is this going to print out? Well, so you know when you're doing regular division, Jesus. So you know when you're doing regular division, right? And let's say you do 6 divided by 3, right? That's going to give you 2. But what happens if you do 7 divided by 3? That's going to give you 2.5, right? And 2.5 is not an integer. So the mod, what mod does is it takes the leftovers. So if you do 6 divided by 3, no, not 6 divided by 3, 7 divided by 3, you're going to do 3 goes into 7 2 times, and it's going to have 1 left over, right? When you're writing it out, and that 1 is what x is going to be, right? So to prove this to you, we're going to compile this shit again, and we're going to run it again, which actually, so I'm just going to say 7 as our test, and we should get 1. X equals 1. So now, mod is not commonly used, but it is often very helpful for calculating money. Like how much do you have left over your change, right? And you take that number and you say this is your change, right? So now we're taking our number, we got our declaring, right? Alright, so this might be a little confusing, so before we move on, I just want to get something clear that I forgot to put in before. Double slash creates a comment. This is a comment. So if you're confused, you can just say we're declaring the bool X, right? And you can this can be anything. It can be a numbers, it can be whatever. And this is all comment. And essentially what a comment is, it is a line of code that the computer ignores, right? So it's just going to ignore this. There's another type of comment which Visual Studio Code automatically does for you. You slash star star, right? And you see how it auto completed that star slash. So everything in between is essentially comments. So this can be anything. Like everything in here is a comment, right? Right? What are comments? So you can see it'll still run the same. So if I just compile it and run it, which by the x7, say 7, 1, we get the same results. This is totally ignored, right? Like even if I did say x equals 3, right? This should just change. This not there. Let's say we do that after we do the math. We're just completely ignoring this step. We're just completely changing it. We're initializing it to something new after you do the math, completely null and voiding the math. So let's just make sure that this has no effect. Compile, run, 7, we're 7 modding 3, and you should get 1. We still get 1. It's not 3. Comments are handy dandy, aren't they? So now that we've learned math, let's look at something else. These are called if-else statements. They check if anything is greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, or not equal to. And these are often, more than often than not, integers, and the booleans, which we haven't really quite looked at yet, which we will look at for this. So if-else statements. So we have our body right here. We have if, parentheses, some value equals any of these operands right here. B, when our bracket, remember the bracket doesn't have to be here, it can be down one line. And we're going to say print yes, but if it's not, else, print no. So we're just going to get rid of everything we have, right? So let's do this. Let's say int x equals 9. Say int y equals 8, right? Let's do if x equals y, not with an asterisk though. That's not code. And let's do that. System.out.println x is equal to y, right? Else. Now there is nothing here because we're not checking anything. It's just if that statement is not true, then we just look at the else statement, right? So we just do that. And remember, brackets can be here, can be down here, but little old me likes it there, right? System.out.println x is not equal to y. So we should expect this to print x is not equal to y, right? Because x is not equal to y, right? Because y is not 9, you know. Let's compile. Run. X is not equal to y, as expected, alright? But what happens if we do that? Now they are equal to each other. Let's compile again, and let's run it again. X is equal to y. But this is not all you can do with if else. You can do else if, right? So let's just throw in if, right? So we're saying else if. And we're going to check if, because if that was false, maybe x is less than y, right? X can be less than y, right? And we're going to do else x is not equal to y. So let's say x is less than y. So then x is less than 2, less than y, right? So let's just test that out here. So we have x is less than y. So 7 is less than 9. Because we can all do math together, right? Math with me. Alright, so let's compile. And we should expect x is less than y to print to the screen. X is less than 9. Because 7 is indeed less than 9. 7 is not equal to 9. And it's not an else, because it read this, and then it skipped the rest of the block, right? So if it'll read this, it's not going to read this, and it's not going to read that. If it reads this, if it's not that, it'll read this, and it won't read that. We also have our booleans, right? Boolean, and what's going to call this? Daddy false. Daddy's false, right? So what if we want to see if daddy's true, right? what if daddy's true, right? So if daddy equals true equals true, it's going to say daddy is true. So we're just going to make sure daddy's true, because right now daddy's false. We want to make sure daddy's true. So this is an example with the booleans. Take one. Compile. Run. Nothing happened, because daddy was false. So this is how you compare booleans. What if you want to compare a string, right? String, right? Because str equals, I don't know, let's just call it that, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be anything specific, right? And how do we check, right? Do we say str equals L? No, this isn't going to work. It's just not going to work, because that's not how things work. You have to call the equal to method, right? Say equals, and call this an object. Whatever, we're comparing div to, and we're going to say they were the same. So if these are the same, it'll print they were the same, right? So let's test that. Let's test that right now. Right? Compile it, run it. Nothing happened. I guess they weren't the same. I guess div doesn't equal and object. So now we know how to compare our fancy variables, right? We know how to change up our fancy variables. Alright, what if we want to do it multiple times? Okay, so before we move on to loops and such, I just want to give you a quick prompt to try and work out, because after all, these are working with the basics, and you have to understand the basics to be able to do like a Minecraft plugin, which is what you nerds want. So I'm gonna prompt you with this basic prompt here. Create a program that asks for a number, a grade, like a number grade, and returns the appropriate letter grade back. So say you got like you entered in an 81, it would give you a B. Or if you entered in like a 70, it would give you a C. If you enter in like a 0, it would give you an F. Right? So you want to make sure you use doubles, and then you make sure you're using scanner. So you're gonna have your class. I don't care what you call your class. And have your main method. Put everything in the main method. So that's all. So now let's move on with those loops. So that's where we get to loops. So it'll take this block of code inside your brackets, right? And it'll perform it multiple times. So you have for loops, and you got for each loops. You got while loops, and you got two types of while loops. You got the do while loops, and then you got the while do's. So do while will execute everything in that loop at least once. And then it'll go to the bottom with the while condition. And it'll say, if this is true, go back to the top and repeat that code again. But if it's false, break out of the loop, continue with the rest of the code. So let's start with while. Let's start with the do while loops. Do some code here while x is less than y. And this, we had to put a semicolon there. It's confused. What's x and y? So we had to make sure we declare this above loop. So we say int x equals 0 as a starting, and we say int y equals 0, right? So we have that now, and then we have our loop, right? So let's do some code here now. Let's see if x is less than y, which it's not, because we first have to put code in, because do while loops suck and you should never use them. But they exist because they exist. Right as we have it, we have x 0, y 0. While x is less than y, 0 is not less than 0, so this is what's called an infinite loop. This is just going to keep repeating, and it's going to kill your computer. And let's just see what happens, right? Let's compile and run it. Nothing happened, because this was false, and it just skipped it. It's going to throw in system.out.print and say, done, boys. So let's get information from the user, right? Let's do system.out.println, and we're going to say, enter in a new value for x. X equals, oh, we didn't make a scanner. We can't compare without a scanner. Let's do that now. You gotta catch me on these things, because you're the new guy. Right? Scanner, skin new equals scan.next, right? Let's check an x, right? Enter a new value for x, right? Because x has gotta be less than y. Otherwise, it's gonna keep asking for x, right? So let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. I think I know what happens, but do you know what happens? Compare your knowledge. So see that it goes right into this. It doesn't. There's no checking first. It goes right into it first. Enter new value for x. 4. Wait. This is, of course, as expected because, as we all know, we put in 4. 4 is not less than y, right? So for this to continue, this statement must be true. And because the statement was false, we done, right? So let's see what happens when we run it again. What happens if we put in negative 9? It's going to enter for another number, negative 45y, and that entered because I'm hitting enter to y, right? I'm just going to delete all the loop, right? No, it's like a while loop. No, for loops, while loops. While x equals y, and let's do code here, right? Alright, so it's going to throw in the we done boys, so we know we're done. We done, boys. Just so we remember that we executed all the code in loop, right? So while x is equal to y, and it's going to code here. So let's throw in the, right? Let's do system.out.println generate new y value, right? Because we don't have to just get x, we can get y. We can get whatever variable we want. Anything can happen in this loop, right? So we're going to do y equals scan.next int, right? So now we've gotten y, and now it's going to check it, right? So let's see what happens. Because right now, they're equal to, so this is true, so it's going to enter into the loop. It's going to clear that, compile, and run it. So because it's true, we're entering the loop. Otherwise, it would have ignored it, right? So enter new value. Let's put in 0 again, right? Because it's going to go back. Y is still 0, and x and 0 equals 0. What happens if we put in 6? We done. We done, boys. Because 6 is not equal to 0, right? So what happens if I change the initial value for y? What happens if I do that? It's not going to enter the loop at all. Do you know why? Because x is not equal to y, so it's never going to enter it. See? And we done, boys. It never even entered the loop because the initial condition was false. So for into a while loop, the initial condition must be true. Now let's move on to for loops, right? So, and this doesn't have to be like that. So while, and this can just be like, and you'll see when we get to the for loops, that doesn't have to be, this is going to be like a less than y, right? So you can just click keep adding, right? So we just want to keep adding numbers up, right? We want to counter. Am I making sense? I think I'm making sense, right? I'm just going to print out x, right? Alright, I'm just going to change this back to 0 while x is less than 5, right? Print out x, and we're going to do x plus plus. And all this does is just add 1 to x, right? That's all it's doing. What's the open about? That's open about that. We fixed the error. Look at that. Let's compile, and this should print out x until it's less than 5. So we see 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Because then when it gets to 5, and it increases to 5, 5 is not less than 5. 5 is 5. So it's going to skip in, it's going to go to done. But look how big and bulky this is. It's big and bulky. Big and bulky bad. The best way to get around this is to use for loops. Basic for loop, not a for each loop. No need to get into for each loops here. Just using for loops. So for loops are great for counting. They're great for iterating through things, right? Through repeating things a certain number of times the way you want them to. So let's just do a basic one. So to get started, the basic syntax of a for loop is just a for loop. This is called a for loop because it's for, right? And so it needs a starting value, right? So you often just declare and initialize a value that is only used inside the loop. So, and it's often just I or j, k, or start or counter, whatever you want to call it. And so this is where just our initial value, we're just going to say our initial value 0. It can be whatever value you want. It doesn't have to be an integer. It can be a double. It can be a long. It doesn't matter. And you follow by a semicolon. And this is the while condition in the while loop. So while I is, not capital I is less than, say, 5, right? So this is a condition that's going to go up until I is less than 5. And then it has the increment. So you do semicolon, and then you throw in the increment. So it's going to be like, it can be, well, it can be I plus equals 2, but it's commonly like I plus plus, right? And then you go to your brackets. Remember, brackets, they can be a line under. I'm just putting them here for now, just for simplicity's sake, right? So let's just do a, let's just print out the this print out I to see how the counter works, see how you can use it. So since I'm going to print out in, change that to an I. So this is a basic for loop, and this is just going to print out the values from 0 to 4, because it's going less than 5, not less than or equal to 5. So it's going to save, and we're going to file, run it. So we see we get 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, swiftly followed by our "we done, boys." So that's pretty much all I can show you for part uno, part 1. We'll be getting more into depth into stuff you can do with the for loops, other minor things, oop, and we're just going to finish off the basics of Java. So may work on that program I showed you earlier. And if you need any help, feel free to join my Discord. Link is in the description, and it'll be in the pinned comment. Thank you for watching. Have a great day. Subscribe. The YouTube like stuff, you know. Goodbye.